So I just recently got a request to do Weigela cuttings, and if you don't know what that is, let me introduce you to it. So Weigela is a beautiful deciduous plant that looks just awesome in the landscape, and there are many different styles and varieties of Weigela. This right here is a Java Red Weigela. It's got a darker leaf. As you can see, the leaves are smaller. The plant tends to be smaller overall, but it has a beautiful pink flower on it. This one is a Variegated Weigela, and this is a really popular variety. It's a deciduous plant, so it'll lose its leaves in the winter, and this is a perfect one to take softwood cuttings of. This one ends up having pink and white little blooms all over it, and so I guess you'd say in the landscape the blooms almost look variegated as well. But it's a beautiful plant. I love this one. Both of these varieties are old-fashioned varieties that anybody can take cuttings on and plant around their place or sell. Now for doing these cuttings, I decided to go with a different rooting hormone. This one I use occasionally for just small little projects. Today we're going to use Clonex. It's a great hormone. It's easy to get in small bottles, so if you have just limited propagation projects going on and you're just doing this around your place in your garden, this is a good one to get because, like I said, you can buy it in a small bottle. It doesn't cost that much. The other thing we're going to use is this massive propagation tray. I love this thing. It comes with these built-in vents, so when it's time to start venting this and slowly acclimating to less humidity, you can just open these vents up, no problem at all. It also will help to vent heat if you're getting heat buildup in there. You can actually buy a heat mat that goes along with this and just slides underneath it and fits the outline perfectly if you're doing wintertime propagation or anything that needs a little bit of a boost to get those roots going. Sometimes in the fall you'll need something like that as well. Now if you're interested in this exact propagation tray, I'll put a link to it in the description below. The first thing we need to do is fill all these little cells up with some form of a rooting medium. So now that I've got this fully loaded up with a good draining rooting medium, I want to just douse this with water and get all of this medium saturated with moisture ahead of time. And one aspect of this little propagation tote that's really cool is it separates from that bottom tray there, and those little trays, individual cells there, don't sit all the way down at the very bottom. It actually rests about a ½ inch off the bottom. So we can pull this out, we can water everything, and then any excess water will drip down and sit in the bottom there, and then that will slowly evaporate and feed more water to the soil as it's evaporating from the top. So now we need to take some cuttings of our Weigela, and of course, as with any plant that you want to propagate, you want to make sure that it's watered well the night before so that they're fully hydrated. I've already gone ahead and done that, and then this morning I came out and watered them again just for some extra good measure. It never hurts to have these plants fully turgid and hydrated so that they're ready to go and they can survive for weeks in that propagation tote. The tip cuttings on these deciduous plants tend to root the fastest. The further down that little branch you go, the more firmed up the wood is, the older it is. And so you definitely want to use current season's growth. You don't want to use any dark woody material that went through last winter. But this material will root faster than this material down here. However, with Weigela, it'll all root. So I get a question a lot about my rhododendrons. People say, hey, when it's early on in the spring and I'm pruning my rhododendron, can I use that material as cuttings? And the answer is no, because those rhododendrons really need to be semi-hardwood in order for those cuttings to root, which means later on in the summer. However, these Weigela are taken as softwood cuttings, and so when you're pruning them early on, you can use that material for cuttings all day long. So this will make a nice landscape plant here, and I don't want to tear it up to where I cut every bit of material all the way down to the base. I want to leave some leaves on it. So what I'll do is I'll come down to maybe about here, leave a couple sets of leaves, and let's see, this thing will bush out like crazy after we prune it, but let's go down below this note here, and then we'll take this material here. We can get a lot of cuttings off of this one plant. Now you see I butched this plant back quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to prune this little top guy too. I'm not going to use that as a cutting, But what it'll do is force all those little buds down below to, instead of having one stem coming up, they'll all start growing out. I'll have double, triple, quadruple the branches coming up, and it will be a fuller, more compact plant. So right now it doesn't look that good, but we're still early on in the summer. In another month or so, this plant is just going to be loaded and just full and round and beautiful. And then this would be a saleable plant next spring. Look at the loads of cutting material that we got off of that one plant, and these can each be stripped down to probably 2 or 3 cuttings. You can see how fast this can turn into thousands of plants if you're really just wanting to propagate these and go into the nursery trade. So now we need to get all of these Weigela prepared, and that's the easy part. So one thing that's cool about Weigela is we don't have to worry about this like is in hardwood cuttings, which end is up. You kind of know which end is up, so that's not a problem. The other cool thing about these guys is you can actually do these as hardwood cuttings as well in the winter time. Now with these guys, some of these bigger leaves should be cut in half, especially in a small little tote like we've got here. And it'll just save space and cut down on the moisture loss from the cutting. Now, you might be wondering, why am I leaving all this extra material intact here? But for very good reason. That extra material doesn't have to be left on, but it just acts as an extra reservoir of food and moisture for that cutting while it's trying to form roots. Now with Weigela, you only need one set of leaves. Just 2 little leaves cut in half, one little node below the leaves, which you can see right here. And then the roots are going to come out at that point. Once we get down to this, we're going to dip into our rooting hormone. And this is that Clonex. We'll just grab this, dip it down in, shake off the excess, and it's really that easy. Finally, all we have to do is stick the cutting, and I'm going to use a little dibbler right here because these softwood cuttings sometimes will bend or snap if you try to push them down through the medium. So we'll just dibble a little hole there, set the cutting down in there, tamp it in firm, and that's all there is to it. Sometimes you'll come across material like this. It's just very tender softwood material that's so fresh and new, it might not be good material. Now if you had an intermittent mist system where you could keep an eye on things really closely, then this would probably root the fastest, but sometimes you get into this realm where it's just too tender, and more than likely it's going to wilt over and not really stand up to the test of time in that propagation tote. And then sometimes you come up with material in between. This down below is softwood, and it's not firmed up completely, but it's just a nice, beautiful softwood material. And then this tiny little branch just starting to come out. Sometimes, just to help prevent any issues, I'll just snip that right off the top. And then we'll take the leaves off here, and we're good to go. That will probably root as fast or faster than anything else in there. And there they are, 16 of them all stuck in there nice. I'm sure that we're gonna get a ton of these to root. Now, I'm gonna go back and get some of those Java Red Weigela cuttings and stick over here. We're gonna have a lot of extra room here. All right, and they're done. So we've got all of these guys stuck. We've got, it looks like 24 of them there, 4x6. So they're all stuck, they're all ready to go. Now all we have to do is wait. These are softwood cuttings, so they should root really quickly. I'm talking 2, 3, 4 weeks. Sometimes they'll go a little bit longer depending on how far down the stem you went. But for the most part, these little guys will root quickly, especially Weigela. I absolutely love this plant. You guys just wait and see. When we get these going and we get them growing in pots, I'll show them to you blooming. So I'm going to put the lid on this now. We'll make sure that we've got some humidity built up. We're going to go put this on the north side of my pole barn because I'm in the northern hemisphere and I don't want any direct sun hitting that plastic tote or it will cook these cuttings. These are softwood cuttings. They don't stand up to a whole lot quite yet. So we need to just take extra special care that they're in the shade, they're not getting cooked, but they've got plenty of overhead skylight. I've got a lot of extra space, you see. We're going to save that for some other videos, but for now, I'll see you guys in just a few seconds here for you guys. It's going to be a while for me, but let's see what these look like when they're fully rooted. Let's go. Alright, so today is August 17th, and it has been about 7 weeks since we started this project. Now, just to let you know, These Weigela well, first of all, you see some other cuttings going on here that weren't there the last time you saw these Weigela cuttings, but that's another project for another day. I'm going to let you guess as to what those are. We'll see how that one turns out. I'll show you down the road. But these are the Weigela cuttings. We've got Java Red, and then we've got the Variegated Weigela here. My absolute favorite Weigela. And there's been somebody on here that has been harassing the heck out of me about finishing this video up, and you know who you are, so here it is. Now, like I said, it's been about 7 weeks. Now, these guys actually rooted after about, some of them at about 3 weeks, most of them at about 4, and then I waited a few extra weeks just to get some solid roots on them. So they start rooting much earlier than I pull them out of here, but I have had that dome that I showed you covering this whole thing the entire time, and I actually came out, just in case you're wondering, because this question gets asked a lot, how much did you water them? Well, for this particular project, these guys can handle a lot more water. I have a really good draining medium that's inert, and so I came out here probably once a week after about the 3-week point, and I started seeing some roots, and I just moved the watering wand over this. I pulled the dome off, just ran the watering wand over it, and it just, all the water just kind of trickled down below all those cells and is in the bottom tray. So there's no standing water in these cells, but I just wanted to make sure there was moisture maintained in here because we've had a very hot summer. Now, I know some of you are wondering this. I'll just say it again. These have been on the north side of my pole barn. I am in the northern hemisphere, and no direct sun touches this thing. Lots of overhead skylight above this, so we've got plenty of light to help with photosynthesis and rooting, but no direct sun. Otherwise, these cuttings would have been cooked. But you can see this worked out really, really well, and these things are all growing magnificent. All that growth is new growth that you see right there, and it's doing really, really well. Let's take a look at the roots. And for those of you who are wondering, and if I didn't put this in the beginning of the video, that is the dome I used this whole time. I had the tops completely closed, and there was 100% humidity around these cuttings this entire time. I still haven't acclimated them to less humidity, although they're growing very well on their own roots. At this point, I would probably just, I don't even need to, or I could open the top, it doesn't really matter, but I would just open the top, tilt this thing sideways a little bit to allow for some airflow, and then we can probably just take it off from there after a few days because they do have so much root structure down in there. I don't know that I would completely pull it off immediately though. You wouldn't want these little guys to just start wilting because they're not used to the dry air. The only thing I am concerned about are these cuttings because they're not fully rooted yet, but I'll play around with it. All right, so let's take a look at these Weigela roots. I'm going to tilt this back first, and we're just going to see what we've got going on. Look at that. Look at that. All of them just rooted magnificently. Let's get this up here. You see all that? Look at those roots just hanging out there, and they're looking for water, man. They're going down in there like crazy. Let's pull a few of these out. So the Java Red Weigela took a little bit longer to root than the Variegated Weigela, and I've done this, I've been rooting Weigela for years, and that's typically always what happens, but they both root fairly well. I'm gonna have to put, oh, that actually came out easier than I thought. So there's one of them, very well rooted. It's kind of almost water roots because there's so much moisture in there, but I'll get these guys potted up and they'll do real well without any problem at all. These Weigela just grow like crazy. All of the Java Red are probably pretty comparable. I don't want to rip these out too easy and kill the roots. There we go, there's another one. Roots all down through there. This plant is very well rooted, 7 weeks old, and it's got new growth coming out here on the top, and it's going to do really well. I'm not worried about these guys at all. Let's pull. In fact, with these Weigela, I might be able to just pull them out completely and put them into pots right away and just keep them watered for the first couple days real well. And that might be enough to acclimate them without having to slowly open the humidity dome. But let's look at some of these because these guys had massive roots. Let me see if I can get down in there. I love these variegated varieties. In fact, we should go look at the ones that I took the cuttings from. They're doing fantastic right now. Come on, buddy. These guys are rooted so well in there. There it is. Look at that. All those roots. I'm actually ripping some roots off just to get them out of there because they're going down through the bottom of the container. But tons of roots on these guys. And these roots on Weigela are so just water seeking, and they grow like crazy. And so once you get them planted, make sure that that's what you want and that's the spot you want them in, because they're hard to remove. Let's pull another one out. Come on, buddy. Yeah, they got roots way down in there. I'm gonna rip some of them up trying to get them out. There it is. Look at that plant. Isn't she a beauty? Let's see if I can. There you go. Look at that plant. Such a beautiful cutting. I'm going to take you guys over now. You see these guys are just all rooted like crazy. Again, there are all the roots hanging out the bottom. I'll probably cut those off before I pull them out. But let's go over and look at the parents that we actually took all these cuttings from since we pruned them back. All right, so do you remember how little those plants were in the beginning, and we pruned them all back and took all those cuttings? This is how aggressive these plants are. So there is, I think there's 2 of them in there. Yeah, there's 2 of them. The mother Weigela that we had. I'm gonna move this pot out of the way and let's just pull this out. Take a look at that. Isn't she a beauty? And that's what the flower looks like. It's kind of actually towards the end. They don't look as pretty right now, but they've got pink and white flowers on them. And when these get mature and they're growing in the ground, they're covered, I mean loaded in these little pink and white flowers. And they're very long-lived plants that just perform year after year. They're very hardy, they're very beautiful. Once you get these in the ground and you start pruning them back over and over again, they just get thicker and more massive, and just they'll fill in a huge area with that variegated look. And I absolutely love this plant. It's such a beautiful, gorgeous plant. And now here's the thing. These things grow so vigorous. The roots on these are massive, and so it's in a 2-gallon pot now. This thing already either needs to be, it'll go dormant going into the fall and winter now, but they need to be sold to a nursery or sold to somebody individually to plant in their landscape next spring, or they need to be up potted because these roots grow like crazy, and then they'll just start taking off from there. Here's the other one. This is the other one. I had this in a 1-gallon pot, so it's a little smaller. It's not flowering yet, but you can see beautiful growth. And you can take, that was what I was going to tell you on the other one, you can take more cuttings of these all summer long like this. These, I mean, I'm not going to take any more of these right now, but you could take, I mean, these things just multiply like crazy. Here's the Java Red, and like I said, we're getting to the end. I'm going to pull this out. Just get that back there. It's getting to the end of the season for blooming, but the flowers were much prettier a couple weeks ago. But you can see those flowers on there. They're pretty little pink, and it's covered in these pink kind of flowers. It's a darker plant, darker leaf. None of these plants are patented. These are free to propagate. There is a variety like this. I think it's called Wine and Roses. It's a little bit deeper leaf color and more prolific bloomer, but you know what? That doesn't matter to me. This is a beautiful plant when it's in full bloom. You can see all the spent blooms on there. And it's free to propagate, it's free to sell, and it's an absolutely beautiful plant. And so that's why I keep it around here. And then, like I said, the variegated against that, you know, if you had a clump of those and a clump of those, it's just a beautiful landscape plant. And one of the main things I love about these Weigela is they're foolproof. I mean, they root really easily and readily. When you plant them, they'll grow in a range of environments. They're very cold hardy. They bloom prolifically every year, year after year, once you get them in the ground, and you can prune them back hard and they'll come back every single year, year after year, fuller and more beautiful looking. And I mean, they're pretty much like a bulletproof plant for your landscape. But I absolutely love Weigela. I keep these 2 varieties around because they are so beautiful. There you go. So I know that this one was a long time coming, and it's finally here. You got your video. You know who I'm talking about. The Weigela right in front of your face, rooted beautifully. All of these cuttings are rooted fantastic, and I'm going to pot them up into probably 1-gallon pots and grow them on through the rest of summer, and then next spring they'll really just start taking off. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know I did. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.